Έτοιμες. Να ξεκινήσουμε. Το ξαναλέω τώρα που είστε όλες εδώ, δεν κουράσατε. Όλο το meet σήμερα θα είναι μαγνητοσκοπημένο και με υπότιτλους για να το ξαναδείτε αν δεν καταλαβαίνετε κάτι ή αν δυσκολεύεστε λίγο με τα αγγλικά. Θα το ξαναδείτε όλο με υπότιτλους, οπότε δεν θέλω να σας αγχώνει αυτό. Αν κάτι δεν καταλαβαίνετε στην πορεία, με σταματάτε για να σας το μεταφράζω. Εντάξει. Τέλεια. So, Ian.
Hi.
Your time.
So, my name is, I'm the UK distributor for 2010 at a national level.
Hello.
Hello.
I teach on an international level across PMU, SMP, and a lot of skin and scar restoration. I suppose I'd say I specialise a lot more within skin and scars than anything else, although I came from a PMU background like you girls. You all do PMU, yes? Brilliant, okay. So the idea of this course is it's designed for those with the PMU backgrounds, those that understand pigment theory. They have a certain skill set with a machine, although it's nothing like PMU at all. So everything you've learned in PMU, throw it out the window. My personal belief for SMP is it should be natural and it should be undetectable. We shouldn't be seeing really heavy hairlines, blue heads, or anything like that. So for me, less is more. And my approach is to build things up very slowly, which you'll see over the 2 days that we'll be together. But also take a route where you're building confidence, not destroying it, because there's some very bad SMP out there. Now, what is SMP? Have you all come across it before? No?
Ακούτε.
Have you all came across SMP before?
No.
No, okay. So SMP is, I suppose, a little bit like a tattoo. The placement of the pigment is within the dermis, but very high up. The easiest way to think about it is the dots that we place in the skin, the deeper they are, the wider they look. So we're always caught in this balance between something that looks really neat and precise to sometimes it's a little bit too little. Sometimes if it's a little bit heavy, we need to remove. So for me, it's all about being light. So less is more, having good stretch, a lot like when you're doing permanent makeup. It's a real benefit to those with thinning hair. And my business personally hasn't been built on men. It's been built on women. And women that have hair loss problems, be it going down the route of regenerative therapy or this, where it completely disguises the hair loss. So for me, my market is 90% female. I do very little men. So it's mainly for people with severe hair loss, and men and women definitely lose hair very differently. Most hair loss is always down to hormones for everybody. So be it male or female, typically it's hormone related. Within your client base, are you mainly female, I'm assuming, being PMU? Yes, no. How many of us speak English?
Ακούτε.
Okay.
Ξέρω. Σπονέ.
Δεν μιλάνε, δεν απαντάνε. Απαντάω εγώ.
Ενδεχομένως κάποιες ερωτήσεις δεν ακούγονται καλά γι' αυτό.
Αυτό δεν ακούγονται καλά.
Ότι
Κάτι
είναι
μία
ερώτηση.
λέξη άμα χάσεις.
Ναι, αυτό.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but there are some... we have some gaps.
Έφυγε.
Ωραία. Okay.
Ξαναμπήκε.
Ό,τι δεν ακούτε, να το ρωτάτε, κορίτσια. Διακόπτετε και ρωτάτε.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
It is better, yeah?
Yes.
Right, okay. So I was saying, within your clinics, is it mainly female?
Me, female.
Okay.
Female.
Brilliant.
The most of them.
For brows.
Okay. Brilliant. So for me, hair loss for women is quite an important part of my business. When it comes to women, once we get to menopausal or even perimenopausal age, you will notice hair thinning happens fast. So any of my clients that are late 40s, early 50s, coming into their 60s are predominantly my clients for S&P, not men. Okay. Men you'll see everywhere have an S&P because it's one of the few treatments that they do. For me though, women are the spenders. Women like to invest in themselves. Men are happy to go bald, whereas women will do anything to disguise and feel more feminine. So the approach we take can be very different when it comes to the tattoo elements. So when we go through it on the day, we will have a slightly different approach, be it male or female hair loss. Now, some of the benefits of SMP are that there's no downtime, so you have minimal downtime. Whereas when you get things like hair transplants, a lot of women and men don't want to do them because you've got to shave the hair, you've got to implant the pigments. Also, hair transplants don't always take. So you have a lot of hair transplants where they go in, they have it, they spend £5,000-10,000 on it, and it doesn't take at all. It's a very good treatment to do things like camouflaging for either alopecia, where you get alopecia areata, which is just patches, or full-blown alopecia, which we can show you examples of clients we've done. Also, you can disguise scars. More and more in the UK, and certainly where I live in Gibraltar, a lot of people are having things like facelifts nowadays, where they'll get surgery and they'll have then a scar that runs round, and normally it's hidden within the hair. So it's a really good treatment for disguising scars within the hairline as well. In addition to that, if you girls can link up with any local hair loss clinics, so anybody that do hair transplants, there is a market there, because most of these hair transplants need work. They have the hair transplant, but it looks better with SMP. And sometimes they're left with very bad scarring from the hair transplants, and it's a really good way of managing that and, you know, completely disguising the scarring altogether. For me though, it should be 100% natural. You shouldn't be able to detect you've had it done, and when you do, unfortunately, it kind of has the opposite effect. It doesn't boost the confidence. Cost-wise, depending on your market, would depend on what you charge as well. Where I'm currently, it's usually about £2,500 for a full head that I charge. Female hair density can be anything from £500 if it was just the fronts, to something a little bit more, to £1,500 if it's a full head. Within your manuals, you will have a page which has, let me find it. This bit on, let me show you. So typical clients. So if you all just go to that page first.
Το βρήκατε?
Το ένα είναι, σωστά.
Ναι, προς το τέλος.
Ναι, okay.
Found it?
Yes.
Fantastic. So for me, this is probably one of the most typical clients you get from a male point of view. As men, we tend to thin here. Sometimes it will come high up here, and sometimes we'll be left with a little islands here. So it is very different from women. And a lot of the time you'll see complete bald patches like we have in this example here. This client absolutely is suitable for SMP. It would look better, however, if he shaved it a little bit shorter. So again, I suppose we need to manage expectations. So we can always improve, but if you want the best results, we may suggest shaving the head on men. Sometimes it's fine to leave it as it is. It all depends on how thick the hair is. So for somebody like this, you absolutely could do the treatment on. But you would probably get a better result if you completely shaved his hair. Okay. As we move on to the next clients, the next one we have receding hairlines. Receding hairlines happen in both men and women. For me, it's a really good treatment to do for this one. You can get 100% camouflage, so it's completely undetectable. One of the concerns we sometimes have, though, is that some people want to lower the hairline. So rather than staying within the hair, they want to bring it down, and it's a big no. So I think as artists, like you probably do with brows, sometimes you'll say, no, it's not for me, go see somebody else. You see it a lot in the USA where they have very square hairlines, and it looks awful.
Yes.
So
It's like the Playmobil.
for a hairline, if a man's hairline's gone very high, I can still only tattoo within the hairline if he wants to keep his hair. If he would like to get rid of his hair, absolutely, we can give a lower hairline and do pretty much what we want. But this sometimes is the tough decision for men. I know I shaved my hair off a long time ago and I didn't like it. So thank God I've got good hair. The next client is a typical client, either complete or near complete hairline. You'll see this client in the photo and you'll see him later on with the end results. And you can see it was almost like halfway. So this, for me, is the ideal client. And for a head like this, I'd probably be charging about 1,800 because it's not a full head. It's only really half a head. But you will blend all the way back.
Which one are you talking about? I'm sorry.
The one that is complete or near complete hair loss. So the third page.
Είναι κορίτσι αυτό που λέει ολική απώλεια.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll tell you when to move on. So complete and near complete hair loss, these are the ideal male clients.
Okay.
We then also get alopecia clients. I've only had one full head one that we've ever had to complete where he has no hair whatsoever, and it was pretty easy because he had no hair. So it almost made our life easy that we could do as we wanted. We could have the hairstyle as it was. With a client like this, we've got to look at the hair follicles, how they grow, the pattern they grow, because everybody's slightly different. So the difference between being, you know, fair and having thin hair to then being, I don't know, a black guy who has really thick, coarse hair, but very few hair follicles, will completely change how you do the pattern. So we'll be looking at this when we meet clients face to face. We'll be looking at their hair pattern, especially if they're male. Female, it's slightly different because it's more density work. But the approach with men is very much about precision. Less is more. And you'll frequently have me refer to kind of three areas, which is depth, density, and also dots and the spacing of those dots. So it's almost like the more spacing you have, the more times we come back in and have a look at it. You don't ever want to put everything too close. And this is usually dictated by the hair growth itself, as opposed to us.
Mm-hmm.
We've then got a female client, which you'll see in the next page. So this statistic in itself is pretty shocking, that 50% of the population, when they get to a stage of menopausal, will experience hair thinning. That's 50% of your clients. And this, for me, was one of the most important things of why I didn't concentrate on men, because men don't really come in my clinic. They're not my clientele. A lot of men are happy to be bald. Not all men want anything. So for me, this was the ideal client base for me. And nobody else in my industry was focusing on them. And even today, there's very few SMP artists focused on women. It's nearly all men. And I find that quite shocking. The one thing we need to bear in mind is that the hair color doesn't necessarily dictate the pigment color. We still have to respect undertones and avoid anything from going too dark. Now, where you've got brows, and you'll understand with a brow that it can go very ashy and blue, it can do that with the head. but mainly that's down to the depth, and you need very little work to get the pigment into the skin. If you overwork it, it will be too deep. It will look bad. So, next page. This is typically what we get with a lot of women and men, where they have diffused hair loss, where there's little patches. It's not that they're bald, it's just thin in certain areas. But this can be almost hidden completely. Yeah. Ethnicity will play a key. So on the next page, we talk about ethnicity. So things like darker skin clients, we will use things like larger needles. So typically we use a 3RL and 0.18 is my go-to needle. We will go up to a 5RL, 0.18, depending on the ethnic backgrounds. So for darker clients, you tend to have thicker hair, but less of it. So you want bigger space in between it. Whereas Caucasian, Fitzpatrick 1 to 3, we tend to have thicker hair, more of it, but very thin. So for me, going in with a really small impression makes it look a lot more natural. And as part of this, when we do get together, when we look at the Clinique colors, we will choose 2 or 3 colors per client. I'd never go in with just one color. I just think one color makes it look quite flat. Whereas I'd rather come in with a mixture between darker and lighter shades. A lot of this treatment is very hands-on. So although we'll take you through bits today on the call, you know, until I get in front of you, that's kind of where the real thing starts. And the idea of this call is to get this bit out of the way so we can have more time on the skin. So it's important that you read through each section and spend some time. But if we were to flick a little bit further on to this page here, so you've got just after the heads, you've got these heads which we'll use during training. But then you go on to this page here.
Ευδοκία, εσύ δεν το έχεις αυτό.
Α, στο 2 είμαστε.
Είναι στο 2. Μπορείς να ανοίξεις το αρχαίο από το Viber που το έχω στείλει. Excuse me, Ian, let them find the page.
Yeah, no worries. I'm waiting.
Okay. Κορίτσια, αν κάτι δεν καταλαβαίνετε, μου το λέτε για να σταματάμε να σας τα εξηγώ, έτσι.
Ναι.
Ο λόγος που το κάνουμε σήμερα αυτό είναι για να έχουμε πιο πολύ χρόνο ή μάλλον να μην διαθέσουμε πολύ χρόνο τις 2 μέρες που θα είστε εδώ για τη θεωρία, τόσο πολύ χρόνο, και να πάμε πιο πολύ να κάνουμε πρακτική και όσο πιο πολλά μοντέλα γίνεται και όσο πιο πολύ γίνεται χαρτογράφηση σε hairline κτλ. Οπότε, αν κάτι δεν καταλαβαίνετε από σήμερα και από αυτά που θα διαβάσετε τις επόμενες μέρες στις σημειώσεις, καλό θα είναι να τα σημειώσετε για να τα δούμε μαζεμένα. Εντάξει.
Ναι.
Τέλεια. Ευδοκία μου, το βρήκες?
Ναι, το βρήκα.
Τέλεια. Ωραία. Okay, Ian.
Okay, so the diagrams within this, we'll use them during our training to draw on, and we'll have little felt tip pens and we'll map out where the dots should be and the spacing. But you'll see there's a good before and after picture of the guy with half the heads to then what it looked like. And that was 6 months healed as well. So you can see there, he's got a hairline.
Yes.
It's unnoticeable. And we'll show you how to do that once we get face to face. Later on, a few pages on from this, you will have a scale like this, which is the Norwood scale.
Okay. Yes.
The Norwood scale is pretty much how I price up what I'm going to charge, and I use this scale, especially for men, to decide how much work it's going to take. So working on a client between 1 and 3, where it's mainly hair density. Might only take 2 sessions, 3 sessions at most. Working on a client kind of 3 upwards can take anything between 3 and 5 sessions. So I kind of plan accordingly, you know, because some sessions can be 2-3 hours long. Some sessions may take me 30 minutes. So it all depends on what comes in. And when we meet face to face and we've got clients in front of us, we'll decide on the pricing together. And then that can give you an understanding. It's probably also worthwhile looking at the local area and trying to look at competition. What are they charging? So you get a better understanding. And even if you need to send a little fake message in and just say it's for my husband and, you know, he's completely bald and what would it cost? Just to kind of get an idea of what locals are charging.
Yes.
For me, early days, I think it's more important for you to get people in front of you and to keep your skill set high than trying to charge a lot. Even if you were doing 1 client a week and you were charging £300 to £500, it's still £300 to £500 once a week. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing early days, especially for female hair density, because sometimes it can be pretty quick. It can literally just be these parts here a lot of the time.
Yes.
A few pages on from this, you will find female hair loss, and you'll see some pictures of clients again. Bear with me a second. Like here.
Yes.
Me, if I'm honest with you, I take more pride in this work than I do the men, because I just think women shouldn't be bald. Men were used to being bald. It's socially acceptable for a man to be bald. Nobody laughs at you down the pub. Whereas I think with women, people do point, people do stare. And even down to kids, you know, kids ask questions, don't they? Why is that woman bald? And, you know, it's quite a personal thing. So for me, I would rather do these clients all day long than I would men. I just think that
Still with dots too.
all dots. All dots.
Okay.
You will see people do lines. It doesn't hold.
Okay. Yes.
If you think of your knowledge from a brow point of view and how difficult it is to get a hair stroke to hold, and a hair stroke to hold quite neat and oily skin, the head is the oiliest part of the body. Every hair follicle has a sebaceous gland attached to it. So therefore, every day you have oil coming out over and over again, it just doesn't hold. Or if it does hold, it then becomes very thick.
Yes. Okay.
Also, it looks detectable because you'll have hair that moves and folds and changes spaces. When you've got density work, it's almost unnoticeable.
Yes.
Now you will find that, and I've got a client at the moment that I'm having this argument with, where she keeps wanting more, and I've had to say no. I'll give her as much as I possibly can, probably more than I wanted to. It still looks okay to her. To me, I think it looked better with less. And this is where you've really got to push back and say no.
Yes. Okay.
I do feel that a lot of my female clients suffer from kind of almost a little bit of not being able to see what's in front of them. Like, we can all see it. They'll go home. The husband sees it. They say that, but they want more. They're always wanting more. And it's part of the emotional journey you need to go through. And it almost feels sometimes they have body dysmorphia, but about just the hair. And maybe it's because they spend so long worrying about the hair. I don't know, but I see this a lot in female clients where they don't recognize it. And then I'll take a video and they'll watch the video and they're like, oh yeah, I can see it.
Before and after. Yes.
Yeah, so you'll get more of a push with women where they'll expect more and they're more demanding. Men will be like, it looks okay. And they just go with it. Okay. So the next page, 2 pages on, you can see that we've got, or 3 pages, sorry, we've got the Ludwig scale.
Yes. Okay.
Everybody got that page?
Yes.
So this is typically how women thin. So a lot of the time they're thin from here outwards, and a lot of the time I'm just bringing it back in. It's a really easy comfortable process, as you've seen just a few pages earlier, where you've got a woman there that's had two women that have had the same thing done. I'm a big believer that shouldn't be black. You should have a pattern. They should be a division. One of the things I think that I see done too many times is people just fill the scalp with all color, and it doesn't look good. Remember,
You have to have the gap in the hairline here.
Yeah, I think it's important that you still have a hairline, or you have some kind of central parting, or even if they wear it off to one side, always respect that and put it where it needs to be. But they should be some bare skin. That's how it should look. Now, colors we'll cover when we get there, because we can play with the colors then face to face. A lot of scalp disorders within here, and it takes you through each one. If I'm honest with you, the main ones we come across are psoriasis and dermatitis and eczema. Those are the three. You can't treat somebody with that. It will just fall back out. You'll put the pigment in, 2-3 weeks later, it comes back out. One of the challenges that you do have with anybody with alopecia is it's an autoimmune disease. So their body does attack the pigment differently. It does break it down faster. They will need more touch-ups. And it can be a fine balance between getting it right. I have a client in Gibraltar who has alopecia. He gets these little wounds that he picks, and he ends up getting scarring, and all the pigment drops out there. So every 6 months, we're tweaking, re-adding little bits back in where it came out. So those clients, it can be difficult, but they're also consistently paying you. So if you need to tweak it, you're going to make more money. It's not necessarily always a bad thing, just to keep it looking good all year round. For me personally, I'm not about come every 3 to 4 years. I want you back once a year for an annual touch-up. I like to do less is more. I like my customers coming back. It doesn't make sense. It's a little bit like brows. My styles of brows are powdery and light, and something that's going to fade, because in 12 months' time, they're going to come back and see me. And I want the repeat custom. Other artists will have a different approach. The pigments we use will matter here. So the Clinique pigments will fade faster than the traditional black pigments that are used. Okay. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We can do more touch-ups, and it keeps that repeat business.
Okay.
So if you move on to this page here, where you've got skin and scalp disorders. There's a lot of photos there that I'm not going to take you through them all right this second, but it's worth reading through, because these are the typical scalp disease that we see. My general rule for anything is, if it's red, oozing, pussy, bleeding, don't touch it. Send them away. I'm not a trichologist. I'm not a dermatologist. I don't diagnose. I always just send them to a professional. Yeah.
Κορίτσια, εντάξει.
Ναι, εγώ τουλάχιστον.
Is it all making sense so far? Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to go quite a few pages on now, or back. So sorry, because I want to show you some work. So if you can go back to this page here. That one.
Αυτό είναι στο βιβλίο.
It's page 53, so it's about 1/4 of the way through, so near the front.
Είναι περίπου στη μέση του βιβλίου.
Στο 2 συνεχίζουμε, έτσι.
Στο ένα.
Όχι.
Το βρήκατε?
Ναι.
Τέλεια. Ωραία. Okay, Ian.
We all get? Okay. So for me, I think this is a great handout to give out to people, and we can give you a copy on Canva that you can tweak. So when somebody comes in and asks about a treatment, I've got this as a standalone thing, and then you can send it out as almost like information on the options. It does take you through some of the reasons for hair loss, but it is also the document itself covers many other things, not just SMP. So some of the common causes we see are hair styling. So you'll see this a lot with people that have over bleached the hair. It falls out, it snaps, it breaks, too much color. You're only ever treating the scalp. You're never really treating the cause of the hair loss. So some people will come in and ask if it will improve the hair. It's not going to improve the hair. They still need to look after the hair. Also, when it comes to diet, I don't know about Greece at the moment, but the word Ozempic and semaglutide and all the skinny pens, they really are big in the UK right now. But also as hair loss because of it, because people aren't eating correctly, they're not getting the right nutrition. So you're seeing people on Ozempic and semaglutide, and we're seeing a lot of hair loss. Again, I would personally be discussing that with them, asking if they're on any like skinny jabs. I don't know if it's big in Greece at the moment.
Ξέρω, I don't know. Για τις διαιτές.
A little bit.
Well, I think it is. I don't know if it's in the same level as in UK, but it is. Eating disorders in general.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's huge in the UK. Like everybody's looking skinny, and sometimes they go too far.
Okay.
Some of the main factors, though, are stress, hormones, and medication. And for me, sometimes I want to understand why. Because if somebody is losing a lot of hair, there's an underlying issue. And although I do want to take their money off them and help them, sometimes I need to understand why. If it's general, like hair loss. So a couple of pages on, you've got this post here where we've got some examples. So one of the most common ones for female is the postpartum hair loss. So typically when you've had a baby, really common. In most cases, this comes back within 3 years, but some people do want to treat it and do want to hide it. Then you've got female pattern baldness, which you can see on the top right. This is something we could only treat within the hairline. So I couldn't tattoo any blower. She does wear it very well, this client, and we did do some SMP within it. Then you've got things like complete alopecia and alopecia universalis. So you can see there that the two different types. The bottom right, sorry, she did have some SMP done eventually, but then her hair grew back as well, so it doesn't really matter now.
Okay, so she had other treatments too, huh?
Yeah, she had a lot of other treatments. 2 pages on, we've got some more examples. But again, most of those I've took a different approach as opposed to tattooing. And then if you go 2 pages on further, we've got some examples of somebody that isn't suitable to regrow. So the bottom left here, you've got somebody that has a patch of hair missing here. And we disguised that as best we could. She thought it was a massive improvement, and she was very happy with it. But there's only so much work you can do because there was very little to no hair in one area. But it's still a very powerful change for somebody like her.
Yes, big difference.
So the scope of what can be done is pretty impressive. If I have somebody that is female and they could help themselves at home, I do recommend things like biotin. So biotin supplements, and generally making sure that they're taking the right vitamins and minerals, and their diet improves as well. I don't know about you guys, but majority of the issues I see in clinic are usually related to people being overweight. you know, diabetes, polycystic ovaries. A lot of them, actually, if you look at the clients, 9 times out of 10, they're usually bigger clients, bigger women. And most of it comes down to what they're consuming.
Yes, it's all about the nutrition.
Yeah. So if you can be as blatant and as obvious as saying, look, have you thought about going on a diet? I do. I have no problem with saying it because ultimately I want them to look better and feel better. And I know this is SMP, but if I'm doing things that are regenerative, like your PRF and taking the blood from the body and injecting it back in, it's going to work. But if I'm fighting the fact that they're eating unhealthy, it always has a negative impact as well.
Yes.
Other than that, a lot of the skin theory, I'm assuming you're all happy with skin. So dermis, epidermis.
Κορίτσια, είστε όλες εξοικειωμένες με την ανατομία του δέρματος, φαντάζομαι. Δεν ξέρω αν θέλετε να μείνετε, να επικεντρωθείτε, να συζητήσουμε κάτι πάνω σε αυτό ή αν θέλετε να το... Okay, everyone is very familiar with the skin anatomy.
Excellent. Okay. So when it comes to hair, hair does work in a cycle. So you have an anagen phase, a catagens phase, and a telogen phase. Now, much of those phases happen, and you need to let them happen over the course of kind of 4 to 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really impact SMP because SMP, we can just deliver it. If we were talking more about regenerative medicine, we'd look into the different phases, but please take the time to read through it just so you understand that there's different hair cycles.
Mm-hmm.
One of the diagrams I think I really want you to see is on pigments in the skin, which is this one.
Oh, really?
So it's called pigment in the skin, and it's about just before halfway.
Okay.
Now, this is a really good diagram to make you understand that it's very important to understand how deep your pigments go on. Also, the different types of machines that you use and your pressure and depth, because from one artist to the next will be either heavy-handed or light-handed, and somewhere in between we have to figure out which is the best machine sometimes for you to use. I personally prefer a really powerful machine for SMP, but my pressure is very light. I'm always very, very light. Okay. A lot of the clinic depends because they're so good and they deliver pigment powerfully, but the precision is good. They're very good pens for SMP across all of the clinic range.
Mm-hmm.
What pens are you all using? Because this is where it will vary.
Ευδοκία, αν θες άνοιξε το μικρόφωνο σου.
Εγώ, Αφροδίτη, τι έχω?
Έχεις το must, εσύ, Ντίνα.
Constantina and Aphrodite are using the iFly.
The iFly, me.
Yeah, okay. iFly is a great one. Is anybody else using any other pens other than Clanita?
Yes, Evdokia, what kind of pen are you using?
Pen I have, έχω ένα της πώς λέγεται? Ναι.
Traditional
Ποιο?
PMU pen or?
Δεν θυμάμαι πώς το λένε, αλλά μπορώ να το κοιτάξω.
Εγώ έχω της Xion, το Xion.
Και εγώ έχω το Φι.
A Fee pen, yeah?
Έχω το καινούριο το Φι που έχει βγάλει, το μαύρο.
Ναι, και εγώ.
Διάφορα άλλα, Αφροδίτη.
Okay. Well, on the day we'll have a play around with pens, and I'm sure the girls will have some additional ones that you can have a go and play with.
Yes.
For me, I can use pretty much any pen if I'm honest with you, but I will adapt things like the speed. Even the difference between a pen with a power pack to being plugged in at the wall makes a huge difference on the power output.
Κορίτσια, θα φέρετε ούτως ή άλλως τα μηχανήματα μαζί σας για να τα δούμε στην πράξη και να τα δείτε και μαζί με τον Ιαν σε τι ταχύτητες και σε τι αργά ή γρήγορα μπορείτε να δουλέψετε. Πώς μπορείτε να δουλέψετε με τα δικά σας μηχανήματα. Με ποιο τρόπο. Οπότε, Ian, they will bring their dermographs with them, so
Με
You
πόση
will see-
πίεση δουλεύουμε στη μηχανή.
Ορίστε.
Πόση πίεση βάζουμε, ας πούμε, τι αριθμό όταν κάνουμε...
What kind of pressure they use, what kind of, σε τι ταχύτητα εννοείς?
Ναι,
What kind of pen do you use? Bring them all. Bring
From
them.
the academy.
Oh, at the academy, the Fly's a great pen. I really like the old gold one. That's probably one of my favorites.
That's
But
from-
Fly is a brilliant pen.
No,
They're all
no,
good.
no, I'm sorry. It's from Phi Academy.
From the Fee Academy. Bring it along, and we'll have a look on the day.
Μπέλα, θα το φέρεις μαζί σου στο μηχάνημα και θα το δείτε
Ναι.
μαζί σε τι ταχύτητες πρέπει να δουλέψετε.
α, οκ.
Θα το φέρεις μαζί σου και θα το δούμε επί τόπου. Θα δουλέψεις με αυτό δηλαδή για να δείτε ακριβώς πώς πρέπει να δουλεύεις με το μηχάνημα. So, yeah, they will bring their devices with them, so each one will work the way that you will tell them.
Okay, so I will have some needles. The girls will have Bonita needles. I'll have universal.
Αυτό ήθελα να πω κι εγώ.
So if you're using Fee needles, you probably need a 0.3 RL, 0.18.
Εγώ τι παίρνω?
So if you're not using a universal cartridge,
Universal.
Εγώ, Universal.
are you all universal or not? Because Fee's not universal, is it? Fee's is
I
separate.
think the new machines take universal
Ah, they
needles.
do. Okay. So we can have a mixture. I'll bring some extra ones too.
Okay.
Αλλά θα πάρουμε κι εμείς.
Αυτό, να μας πει τι μέγεθος χρειαζόμαστε για να
Για να
έχουμε.
πάρουμε ένα δυο.
Θα σας τα στείλω εγώ στο Viber, στη συνομιλία, τι βελόνες να έχετε μαζί σας.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay. If you flick a few pages on from this as well,
Δεν άκουσα.
so kind of around about here. I think it's 2 or 3 pages on.
Yes.
We'll talk a lot about blend in, blend out. Where you've not got any hair, we can afford to make it a lot more dense. But as we start to move into hair where there is existing hair, we have to think about the hair follicles already there. So sometimes the spacing will get larger as opposed to being really tight and close.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go through all of this during the day. Other than that, there's probably not a lot of things I can take you through right now without being face to face. There's a lot to go through in terms of hairlines and how to draw an hairline, especially for men. So that for men, the trickiest part usually is the hairline. The skin scalp will go from 0.5 mil to 1.15. So from here to here, it's very, very different, the skin. Therefore, we'll change the speed that we work. Everything will change. How we stretch is everything. So a lot of it's going to be very hands-on. You'll have myself, you'll have the girls there, but then that's probably going to come with me.
Μπέλα,
Ε,
δεν ξέρω αν κατάλαβες τι είπε τώρα ο Ιαν. Σε όλο το κεφάλι, επειδή είναι διαφορετικό το δέρμα,
ναι.
δεν δουλεύουμε με την ίδια ταχύτητα. Με άλλη ταχύτητα δουλεύει σε διαφορετικά σημεία του κεφαλιού, οπότε όλα αυτά θα τα δούμε στην πράξη.
Οκ.
Τι ταχύτητα πρέπει να δουλεύει σε κάθε σημείο του κεφαλιού.
Οκ.
Τέλεια.
Okay. Is there anything else that you girls would like question-wise at this stage?
Επειδή με την ανατομία του δέρματος νομίζω ότι δεν χρειάζεται να μπούμε σε λεπτομέρειες. Όλες είστε εξοικειωμένες. Όλα τα υπόλοιπα θα τα δούμε στην πράξη από κοντά, δηλαδή για το hairline, το σχηματισμό, όλα τα υπόλοιπα. Οπότε, αν θέλετε να ρωτήσετε κάτι συγκεκριμένο, να αφιερώσουμε λίγο χρόνο σε ερωτήσεις.
Όχι, στην πράξη θα ρωτήσουμε.
Ναι, τώρα εγώ τα διάβασα. Τα δύο δεν είναι. Διάβασμα θέλει, οκ, σίγουρα. Πώς να δοθούμε.
Στην πράξη.
Αφού θα δούμε και τα μηχανήματα και
Όχι, δεν έχω κάτι. Αυτό με τα μηχανήματα, μόνο να είμαστε σίγουροι ότι ταιριάζουν και ότι είναι ok, αλλά αφού παίρνουμε τις universal, τις βελόνες, νομίζω ότι οι βελόνες περισσότερο. Ταχύτητες νομίζω ότι θα είμαστε εντάξει.
Ian, the girls are very familiar with skin disorders, with safety insurance and all of this
Yeah.
because
I think-
in the MBO industry anyways. So I think everything else is has to be talked face to face.
Yeah.
Everything else. So I don't think that we have anything more to say here. The only thing that we need to know is the needles that they have to take with them.
I'll send them in the chat to you now.
Yes, the needles that they have to have with them, and I'm not sure that we can that we have to say anything else today.
No. No.
I think that they will have since they already have the booklet in Greek, they will have time to read it.
Okay.
So if they have any questions, we will gather all the questions and talk about them next week.
Fantastic.
I don't know if you want to say anything more.
Not at this stage. I think it's a very practical training, so everything needs to be more hands-on. So
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, κορίτσια, αν θέλετε εσείς κάτι άλλο.
do we get a quick photograph as well? For
Yes.
social?
Αν θέλετε, ανοίξτε τις κάμερες όλες, να βγάλουμε μια φωτογραφία.
Θα σε βγάλω κι εγώ, ρε παιδιά.
Yeah.
Βεβαίως.
Περιμένετε.
Αφροδίτη και η Κωνσταντίνα πού πήγανε? Αφροδίτη και η Κωνσταντίνα.
Whose camera is missing? There's one.
Δεν φαίνομαι.
Όχι,
Φαίνεσαι, Θεά μου, θέλει.
η Κωνσταντίνα δεν φαίνεται. So, yes.
Aufwärts. Κωνσταντίνα,
We'll see you all soon then.
Η άλλη βγαίνει και στον ήλιο. Να είναι πιο όμορφη.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Ευτυχώς δεν καταλαβαίνει ελληνικά.
So, Ian,
Yeah.
we will talk. And κορίτσια, μην φεύγετε ακόμα.
okay.
So, Ian, we will be in touch. We will talk later.
Yeah. I'm free. I'm pretty much
Okay.
free now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Speak
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye.
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 Τέλεια. Λοιπόν, τώρα
Έμεινα
μιλάμε
μονάχες.
μόνες μας. Χρυσά, δεν θέλω να
κατάλαβα
αγχώνεσαι. Ναι, δεν ξέρω αν
Προσπαθούσα
είχε
να βάλω το
αναφερθεί.
Δώστε με ένα λεπτό, κορίτσια, ένα λεπτό δώστε μου.
Λοιπόν, δεν ξέρω, δεν ήξερες ότι το μάθημα είναι στα αγγλικά.
Όχι.
Ναι, νομίζω ότι το ξέραμε.
Ναι, εσείς νομίζατε ότι ήταν στα Ιταλικά το μάθημα. Ας μην το αναλύσω τώρα.
Είναι καλό, σταμάτα. Και αλλά που μιλάς προς τα αυτός, τα καταλαβαίνω καλά εγώ. Δεν ξέρω ότι είναι Άγγλος.
Όχι, προσπάθησα να βάλω
Μέρη,
την υπαγωγή
γιατί
που μου είπε η
χτυπάει το
Μπέλα, δεν το
Messenger?
είχα.
Γιατί παίρνει ο Ιαν. Δεν πειράζει, να τον πάρουμε μετά.
Εντάξει, ωραία, εντάξει. Εγώ θα σας ακούω, κλείνω λίγο την κάμερα και το μικρόφωνο, αλλά θα σας ακούω, εντάξει.
Εντάξει, δεν θα πούμε πολλά πράγματα.
Εντάξει.
Λοιπόν, Χρύσα μου, καταρχήν δεν θέλω να αγχώνεσαι. Αυτά ό,τι είπαμε σήμερα, έχω κάνει εγγραφή και θα σας το στείλω με υπότιτλους,
Ωραία.
για να τα δεις όλα.
Αστέρι είσαι. Αστέρι, λέω.
Πέρλα.
είσαι.
Λοιπόν,
Τα έχεις
τώρα
σκεφτεί
και
όλα.
από κοντά που θα είμαστε, και εγώ θα είμαι, εννοείται, μαζί σας. Ό,τι δεν καταλαβαίνετε θα σας τα μεταφράζω.
Κοίτα, στο σεμινάριο που θα έρθουμε, εγώ θα ήθελα να έχω μεταφραστεί σε όλα. Δηλαδή, τα αγγλικά μου είναι πάρα πολύ και ο Άγγλος μιλάει πάρα πολύ διαφορετικά τα αγγλικά του, κατάλαβες. Δεν πιάνουμε όλες τις
Εντάξει,
λέξεις.
μωρέ, θα του λέμε λίγο να τα επαναλαμβάνει. Αν
Ναι,
δεν
ναι,
καταλάβει,
κορίτσια,
τα κάνει.
ακούστε με λίγο. Εγώ γι' αυτό έκατσα και μετέφρασα 200 σημειώσεις, για να τα έχετε όλα μπροστά σας στα ελληνικά. Δεν ήρθαν μεταφρασμένες οι σελίδες, εμείς τις μεταφράσαμε. Λοιπόν, για να τα έχετε, αλλιώς τα προηγούμενα μαθήματα, να ξέρετε, τις προηγούμενες χρονιές ήταν όλα στα αγγλικά, δεν υπήρχε καμία μετάφραση. Είστε το πρώτο τμήμα.
Η Μέρη της μετέφρασε, όχι εμείς. Η Μέρη.
Ευχαριστούμε, Μέρη.
Είστε το
και
πρώτο
τις
τμήμα που
κοπέλες,
έκατσα και
που δεν
μετέφρασα
έχανε
τις σημειώσεις.
στο σχολείο. Ευχαριστούμε.
Για να είναι και πιο εύκολο και για εσάς, να έχετε το περιθώριο να τις διαβάσετε μέχρι την άλλη εβδομάδα και να το έχετε και μπροστά σας για να μπορείτε και να
Αλλά εκείνη τη μέρα θα
καταλαβαίνετε.
είμαστε και όλες μαζί. Δηλαδή, αν δεν
Μπράβο.
πιάσει κάτι μία, θα το λέει και η άλλη. Εντάξει,
Τις ημέρες του σεμιναρίου και τις δύο εννοείται ότι θα είμαι εγώ μαζί σας από το πρωί μέχρι το βράδυ όλη την ώρα στο σεμινάριο και θα σας τα μεταφράζω όλα.
ναι. Θα βγάλουμε και κανένα βιντεάκι τέτοια λογικά θα.
Τι?
Εγώ.
Τι είπες?
Θα βγάλουμε και κανένα βίντεο να έχουμε. Ενώ και τη διαδικασία του Ιαν και τέτοια να τον έχουμε να τον βλέπουμε.
Εννοείται, δεν το συζητώ. Εννοείται αυτό. Αλλά το μεγαλύτερο, το καλό είναι ότι επειδή είστε όλες στο χώρο και δεν χρειάζεται να αναλωθούμε στην ανατομία του δέρματος, στις αντενδείξεις, στα skin disorders. Αυτά ευτυχώς, επειδή είστε στο χώρο, δεν χρειάζεται να χαλάσουμε χρόνο σε αυτά, τα γνωρίζετε. Δεν ξέρω αν θέλετε να μείνουμε σε κάτι τέτοιο περισσότερο.
Όχι, δεν υπάρχει.
Αλλά σε αντιδείξει και αυτά λίγο που αναφέρουμε. Γιατί, εντάξει, κεφάλι ξέρω εγώ, μπορεί να είναι λίγο διαφορετικό, δεν ξέρω.
Ναι, εννοείται, μα γι' αυτό το είπε. Μα αυτό που είπε και ο Ιαν, και θα το δείτε και μετά, αν δεν το καταλάβατε, είναι ότι δεν ακουμπάμε τίποτα το οποίο είναι κόκκινο, ερεθισμένο, σκασμένο.
Όπως είναι τα φρύδια.
Ακριβώς. Οπότε, θα περιμένετε τώρα μέσα στις επόμενες 1-2 μέρες, θα ανεβάσω το βίντεο με υπότιτλους για να ξαναδείτε τι υπόθηκε. Ρίξτε μια ματιά στις σημειώσεις, συγκεντρώστε απορίες που έχετε μέχρι την άλλη εβδομάδα. Θα σας στείλω τι βελόνες πρέπει να έχετε μαζί σας όσο έχετε Universal υφή.
Εγώ που τον έχω θα πάρω κατευθείαν εκεί.
Εσένα τα έχουμε ήδη εδώ, θα τα πάρεις από εδώ.
Ωραία.
Λοιπόν,
εγώ έχω βελόνες του φύ μόνο.
Ναι.
Βολεύουνε.
Ναι, θα σας στείλω εγώ τι νούμερο, τι βελόνες ακριβώς περίπου να έχετε μαζί σας, να τις φέρετε. Αυτά, τώρα τι άλλο θέλετε, μου στέλνετε στο Viber.
Ωραία, εκτός από βελόνες, χρειάζεται να έχουμε κάτι άλλο μαζί μας.
Όχι.
Μοντέλα, πες.
Που δεν έχουμε.
Εγώ έχω τελικά 2.
Και άντρα και γυναίκα.
Ναι, και άντρα και γυναίκα.
Εγώ έχω και έχω στείλει στον κουνιάδο μου για σας, αν δεν μου είχε απαντήσει ακόμα όμως.
Ωραία, αν θέλετε γράψτε
μου κάποια να ψάξουμε.
Αν θέλετε, γράψτε μου μέσα στο Viber στη συνομιλία για να δούμε τι έχουμε και αν χρειαζόμαστε περισσότερα. Και θα γράψω και εγώ τι έχουμε κι εμείς. Να τα συγκεντρώσουμε όλα, να δούμε τι έχουμε από μοντέλα και αν τα χρειαστούμε επιπλέον.
Ναι.
Εντάξει, κορίτσια μου, αν δεν θέλετε κάτι άλλο, να κλείσουμε.
Ό,τι άλλο είναι το βίντεο με τη μετάφραση, Το βίντεο με τη μετάφραση θα μας τη στείλετε.
Εννοείται. Λοιπόν, άντε, φιλιά πολλά. Καλή συνέχεια.
Γεια σας.
Φροντίτη, θα φύγεις. Φροντίτη.
Θα φύγω. Δεν προλαβαίνω να φτάσω μέχρι το τέτοιο. Θα πούμε μετά, αλλά φυλάκια.
Εντάξει, έλεγε.
Έλεγε.